Hey, folks and fans and the fun club. I'm drmike.org. Let me show you my t-shirt. So this happened last year, was a Waukesha, you could say it's a community health initiative where they brought together, it's like a partner summit, all the people who are providers or have an interest in making community viable from a mental and physical health perspective. Was great, particularly because it's Waukesha, Wisconsin. And if you don't know much about Waukesha, I'd say go on a search engine if you can spell it. But anyway, the point of it is that's where I'm living, and I went on LinkedIn because I was wondering. It was a great summit that happened November 2025, and I'm speaking now at the end of May in 2026. And so I was curious, with the work that I'm going to talk about really quick, who I can tie into among community leaders and people who are really making the effort. And so I haven't gotten a reply yet, but I've been emailing and contacting different people as I'm able to find them and think that they would be a good fit for this. So what am I talking about? So if you don't know me, and I'm just doing this as a live stream, so I'll put this somewhere, probably on mikesmastermind.com, which is my podcast, mikesmastermind.com, and also Community Conversations, which was my dissertation, communityconversations.com, graduate research, because this leads to what I'm inviting you to. But first off, though, introducing myself, if you don't know me, I go by the avatar Dr. Mike because there's a lot of Mikes out there. So drmike.org. .org is my website. I'm a self-proclaimed social scientist. I'm really curious about social psychology and also social philosophy and how we are integrating into our experience. And so I write about this and I talk about this. And so a couple things really quick. So if you're checking me out, you can go to phenombook.com, PHENOM book.com. And if this is sitting in some social site post, I'll try to provide as many links as I can. Otherwise, feel free to contact me and be in touch at drmike.org. The phenom is about the here and now experience. So it's phenomenology, which actually is really a social, you could say, case study in the experience of the structure of our experience. It's understanding what I describe as phenom here and now. So phenombook.com is that. So what we have for you today is basically my quick take on what's going on. There's a lot going on. So I just posted about the mass trance, which is another one of my works. I'm defining this hypnosis of society. Oh, he defined the hypnosis of society. So mass trance, not mass transit. Mass trance, TRANCE. So masstrance.com. You can read it for free right now. These are on Google Docs. Eventually, it'll be published. However, the current work will be a book and coming out this summer. I'll daringly say so in promoting it. It's called whyimpeach.com. So whyimpeach.com. And you know what we're talking about there. So rather than go on a rant about that and the situation we're in, I'm looking at the Medusa and sort of like, well, how do we get to a center point? Because we need to sort of clear the air and the stage to where our perceived reality is projected. So if I'm getting into the heavies, just understand that, our perception and our attitude towards that is sort of all made up, and it defines some element, at least, of our existence in the mass trance. And to me, this is a co-opted identity. So ID for me stands for internal dialogue. ID, internal dialogue, get it? Acronyms. Because it's not just your ID in your wallet or your purse or your passport that you need now to vote with your birth certificate. It's sort of like what has happened that our minds have been so co-opted that we're sort of spinning out of control as a society, or at least manipulated so that our disattraction is really more on elements of greed and satisfaction to what you're programmed into rather than sort of the ability to step back. So taking that role and stepping back is the position of a social scientist. Yes, obviously, I have a position. However, to better understand it is kind of like the goal of what one of my mentors and teachers, Dr. David Jubb's work, controversial as he is, about whole brain functioning. So it's not just the right or left hemisphere or the front lattisphere, what lights up at the frontal cortex for you. It is about this, what's a toward strategy, so we can have a greater understanding and appreciation for each other and for this phenomenon, the experience that we are in together. So whether we want to have an intellectual, highfalutin dialogue or some kind of, something, could be a podcast, where we can come together in a real community conversation and be able to share our viewpoints and concerns for humanity, the future of which I'm hoping that we can, in this process, design a desirable, sustainable future. And having some sense of what that would be, this filtering is what I call divining. And for those of us that are spiritually minded or as a social scientist wanting to understand these structures of experience, this is what the invitation is for. So when I talk about it now, I think it's a critical juncture. So it's the time that I'm recording this, and this is live right now. We just finished our, you could say, well, we started summer, but it began, you could say, with a Memorial Day weekend, which happened. I was at the parade here in Waukesha. And, I get to talk to people as occasion. This is sort of like the MAGA capital for Wisconsin, just so you know. There might be other areas that are even more red, but this really sort of like when you had all the people, dignitaries of the right come here to facilitate their live event or their, man, there's a lot of stuff that was going on, and I was just witnessing it. Not that I went to any of those rallies. I'm sure I missed an experience. So I try to understand things from a MAGA point of view. And if you missed yesterday, you can go to beonmyshow.com, where I got to interview the illustrious Gary Goldman, longtime friend and leader in the education empowerment movement for kids, having youth involved in consideration of their curriculum and what they're being educated in. So I thought we hit it off well. We're definitely different views. He's definitely all in with Trump and MAGA. And so he was texting later. He goes, "Well, I thought we were going to do it more balanced, but you got into it." Well, of course I'm going to react to it because I'm so like wanting to wake people up from the mass trance, acknowledging that I'm in it myself. And so there is some agreement that it's the left and right, two wings of the same bird. So how do we navigate our journey? And that's kind of like where our interests are in this endeavor. So you can check that out at beonmyshow.com, and if you're interested in being on my show.com, go there as well, beonmyshow.com. So we're looking at launching a few different projects here. So I have my Why Impeach book. So yeah, that might be some partisan viewpoint to some, but really, it's really just acknowledging if you're a constitutional scholar, tell me I'm wrong. Political scientist, tell me where I'm wrong. If you're someone who's an expert in law, tell me where I'm wrong. Whyimpeach.com, right? Because all that data and everything put together is from the consensus from that world. It's like, if we're going to do things on the right, well, let's really make it, show it for what it is, right? And then we can say, well, if you think that's where we need to go, or for whatever reason you're against things, let's have an understanding of what the motivation is. But let's not be brainwashed, right? To where we're thinking things that just are not true because fake news or some conspiracy theory has led you off the ledge. And unfortunately, so many of us have, whether it's from the extreme right or left. But we can make an argument to say that there's some vision or some kind of quality. I look at MVP where people feel they're led as their mission or what gives them the most meaning, and that they're talking into their vision, hopefully supported by their values, because sometimes people are talking stuff that's sort of like, well, your values aren't that at all. So it's a value proposition and what it is that you really envision. And that would lead to a sense of purpose. And for those of us that are really engaged, passion, right? Because we really care about the project. And CARES is this model, again, using acronyms, CARES. It's community action research studying this quality of engagement, which Gary, who was on my beonmyshow.com program last night, was pointing out that maybe even though I study it and I present it and project something, ought to be more, I guess, someone who is an example of it. So I took that critique really well because it's sort of like, yeah, no, it's true. I see what people who are really great, really truly being masters of the moment, and I kind of lose it because I go, come on. It's like, how can you take that? Disorientation. Okay. So if that's curious to you and you're wondering what's going on, drmike.org explains it all to you. So anyway, I want to create this as a series and looking at these podcast examples. Be on my show would be one. The launch of JoeBogus.com. Joe Bogus, man. You think about the possibilities of that, talking to the bro world and sort of this weird, you could say, conjuncturing atmosphere that we're in, where it's like, let's examine it. Let's have some fun with it. At the same time, though, it is information, so it's infotainment. Hoping that the listener or the audience would consider things on another dimension as things are talked about. And we're looking to have Bo guests. So if you'd like to be a Bo guest on JoeBogus.com, be in touch. Because if you get the premise of it and you're into wearing funny hats, come on. That's an open invitation. And the same with CommunityConversations.com, although you do not need to wear a funny hat. Just show up, whether it's on a Zoom or you get a local invite. Community conversations do happen around the country. you can go and search and find out what's happening near you. And sometimes they're theme oriented or led like a public hearing. It could be a public official that's directing them. Otherwise, they're pretty organic, and you might find them in different places, from social media where things are posted or some calendar. Anyway, I just leave it up to you rather than giving one direction, because right now it's a very loose orientation because it's very organic. It's a community conversation where people come together either to meet their neighbors or just to have some kind of dialogue and connection to what's going on. And community conversations are very important because they represent a certain level of consciousness, which to me in my graduate study was the focus of how we show up and how do we contribute to community? How am I a member? Is it my ego that has to get recognition and sort of like, hey, give me the pat on the back? And I present things in a certain way because, well, it's always great to get, a thumbs up that people do want to acknowledge you for your work. And hopefully it's a valuable contribution on the MVP, mission, vision, and purpose, to where it aligns to things. And if nothing else, it just kind of knocks you down because it's sort of like, oh, the orientation wasn't quite to your level of satisfaction where your vision was at. Okay, so why not? All right. So the challenge then is really, how do we present something in a way where at least people can conceive of it without the upfront mask showing up? What I mean by the mask, it relates to who resides in the mass trance. Because some form of our identity, this internal dialogue, has been co-opted. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the mass trance. It would be more a reckoning of what's going on. And that's what we shared at the end of our show last night, beyondmyshow.com, this model of the wreck. And that can be found also on mikesmastermind.com. Just search for it, WRECK. And talking about no matter what we're confronted with, to be welcoming enough to consider it and to keep it real and the right that it has to express itself, that it exists at least, at least to the level of its expression. We give it some kind of, consideration, and in the way that we can be kind in our deliberations is going to represent this entrance or easy way to express ourselves. And on some level, at least it's the hope, if not acknowledgement, that we are wanting to at least entertain enlightenment, which is like where we're really being all in the way of personhood, whether you relate it spiritually or just being the best that you can be as a human being. It's worth the consideration. And so what I propose is that we would have a new living philosophy that needs to be evolved, obviously, by the way we practice it. And I call it ultra being. So it is our way of human being. How do we maximize it? So if we were to define enlightenment, it could sort of be, I guess, modeled for its excellence. Not that it has to be necessarily a template that you get penalized if you skip a step or you do it the wrong way, because it's your own life unfolding. That's what the phenombook.com takes apart. You could say how we're having a slice of pie. You need to go to that website to read more about that in our own lived experience. So phenombook.com, PHENOM book.com, phenom, which is the here and now, phenombook.com. All right. So as we engage this and just having a sensory appreciation for it, it's a lived experience. So ultra being would be to dial it in such a way that one could have the ultimate experience of what it is to be alive and to consciously appreciate the experience as we're having it. And maybe we could define or dissect it to some level to where we can go deeper into that rabbit hole. Down we go. And what uprises, right? The Firebird Phoenix, it's a recombobulation. It's a new reawakening. Well, this might be the aha moment, right, that we're looking for. So we break through, right? So it's not like, I could have had that V8. No, it's right now. This is it. It's fantastic. And we could dial it, adjust it as needed so that we can have an appreciation for each other that uplifts all of humanity. It's a lofty goal, and yet here I am espousing it. So that's my work. So I wanted to come on to sort of acknowledge everyone last night. Chris, who was our producer, who recorded last night, beyondmyshow.com, and Gary, who was technically, Gary, you are the first guest because Joe Bogus hasn't launched yet, joebogus.com, and we have the impeachshow.com, which I know you don't want to be on. But so in any way that we can facilitate a great experience for you that does uplift humanity and can dial in this element of enlightenment, whatever it would be for you and for a shared uplifting experience for all, is what my work in consciouscommunityconversations.com and doing this infotainment as podcasts. You can find more of this type of talk at mikesmastermind.com. So mikesmastermind.com. Thank you, everyone. So I don't know if there's anything else to share. When I do this type of thing, I usually get some comments, stuff like that. Let me do the quick thing here. I'm going to have to go into the role of being both editor later and maybe put this into some kind of course, whatever. I'd love your feedback and ideas. Be in touch with me at drmike.org and all the best. Thank you.